I thought he was ugly before. Holy shit. Anyway, Senor Butt Plug. Yeah, he's smoking a cigar, which is sort of ironic, you know. Well, maybe it's not ironic. Maybe he put it there on purpose. But anyway, an hour and 22 minutes. I mean, really. Yeah, okay, yeah, no, I'm not gonna respond to the whole video word by word. I'd like to, but yeah, an hour and 22 minutes is just incredible. So it appears that he's going to justify basically any kind of shenanigans any kind of government wants to apply. So threat bargaining as judicial process. The funny thing is he didn't post a link to New Jersey is citing my case as a legal precedent, which is just hilarious since it was an unpublished decision where the appeals court didn't write a decision in the case. It's an unpublished decision. I guess they just change that arbitrarily whenever they feel like it, but I mean really, unpublished decisions can't be legal precedent. But whatever. I mean, whatever. This is just hilarious. He's defending a ludicrous form of government. And so yeah, there's nothing to say. I will unblock. I think I'm going to unblock everybody just so I can just block the people that comment on this video. Yeah, just to make it right. So anyway, let's play along. We'll do a little tiny bit, and then we'll only skip to the interesting bits.
Howdy, everyone. So it seems that my friend in Mendham has decided to reply to me.
I didn't reply to you. I answered your insanely stupid video with I just giving the proper context just so people can understand what you were reading, and that your mockery of it was essentially just a signature saying I'm a preposterous asshole who thinks we don't deserve honest justice in America. Because it's clear I didn't get that. That it just can't be disputed. It's just not a disputable fact that I didn't get justice. I got a farce. A judge calling me, threatening me out of his courtroom, a judge telling me he doesn't have jurisdiction over constitutional issues when he swore an oath to uphold the United States Constitution. And you're defending that. All of you fuckers are defending that. And I'm supposed to say what except, man, atheists are really, really dumb. Yeah, really dumb. So anyway, yeah, well, we ought to just put a little list together of oppressed minorities, and I ought to just pull one out of the hat and say, yeah, for a year I'll just rag the fuck on them and just talk about how they should be exploited and destroyed. Because that's all people deserve. Like again, if you can't fight for principles, these basic principles of justice, truth, honor, integrity, if you can't defend that shit, then god damn, there's just nothing here to save, right? There's nothing to save. Just put fucking, just put the holes right where they belong. Headshot the whole fucking thing. And fuck you, Matt. I'll throw that in. Fuck you, Matt. Hope you end up in jail getting ass fucked as you deserve. Ah, shit. Didn't get very far. Canadian cigarette. Thank you. Canadians. Canadians are cool, but they send you cigarettes. Anyway, no. I didn't have to pay the taxes on it anyway. So, look, I didn't get very far, right? A couple of seconds into the video, his first remarks are just, I'm saying, he didn't just say that, did he? He didn't just compare atheists to Hitler and Stalin, did he? Yes, he did.
The thing I want to point out is Gary seems to think that it's very interesting for an atheist to not be a ultra-progressive or a liberal.
Yes, traditionally they've been sort of like the artist, I don't know. Think of anybody politically to the left in the 60s. I mean, yeah, they're all, yeah, they were kind of nice people.
And this strikes me as a rather odd statement for someone as well educated as Gary to make, because you would think that someone like Gary would be aware of the fact that, historically speaking, quite a lot of the atheists that have lived in the world haven't exactly had values that most of us would appreciate.
Well, you don't consider yourself. You just fucking badmouth progressives and liberals, all right? You just pissed all over them. So why are you saying we now? You're not one of us. Look at you. Look at what you're dressed like now. Come on, play along, fucktard. Is this your steal from old lady suit or something? Oh, God, you're ugly.
I think that's fairly clear given the nature of the officially atheistic governments and regimes that have existed throughout the world, as well as many of their followers and supporters. They're not...
So, the officially atheistic, so I guess he means, what, the Soviet Union? So again, we're back to Stalin and Khrushchev, and Khrushchev wasn't that bad a guy, actually. Brezhnev or whatever. I mean, is this what an atheist is now? Castro? Ooh, scary, scary.
Not exactly often very friendly. And furthermore, Gary...
I bet Castro was a cool guy. I bet I'd want to hang out at Castro's house. I bet he wasn't a bad guy. I bet he certainly wouldn't say, hey, let's tax cigarettes 800%. I don't think he'd have that kind of dumbass idea.
Atheism says nothing, really, about anyone's political stance. All it says is that I don't believe in a god. So...
in this context, retard, I guess if you're not really up to speed, atheism is a minority, right? It's a minority, okay? And the subject is, what are majority and minority rights under the United States Constitution, jackass? This is about whether the majority has a right to just pass laws saying, hey, whatever the minority people want to do, let's tax the fuck out of that. Do they have a right to do that under the United States Constitution? I'm claiming, no fucking way, jackass! And you're claiming they do. That's the distinction. Wow, you're dumb.
If you're one of those idiots who think that atheism is going to be able to inform someone's political stance, or has any meaning other than a lack of really...
Gee, I mean, really. So all you atheists who have felt a little bit fucking buggered by the fact that you don't have equal representation in government, that you're socially ostracized, that you're socially essentially rejected, any of that angst that goes with being an atheist, any of the burdens that go with being an out-of-the-closet atheist, yeah, he's saying that doesn't exist. That's not meaningful. That's not a meaningfully enlightening experience. God, I mean, we should shove these fuckers back in the closet. I mean, I'm just saying, why have empathy for anybody? Why? If this is just, it's just abhorrent. Yeah, it's disgusting that atheists can't understand. Oh yeah, maybe it's about us being a minority, and maybe we ought to do something to make sure minorities aren't fucking cheated, okay, by the majority. And that might have something to do with our civil rights. Yeah, maybe it has something to do with your civil rights. It might just have something to do with your civil rights. Alright, back again. Anyway, here's the funny part. He brought up I mentioned the little stroke part, and he said, too bad I lived. Too bad I wasn't driving a car when I had a stroke, and that way I could have gotten killed. And that would have been suitable to his purposes or something. Whatever. I mean, just so I can't wish you, a quicker liver death. Do it the typical way. Yeah. You get me. Anyway, I don't mean drinking. Well, I don't mean drinking alcohol. Drinking anal fluids, yeah. You can get it that way. So anyway, so now he went on to the 70-year-old law, and he said he believes in the law being applied equally. No, you don't. If you believed in that, then you would believe that fucking excessive consumption of fat should be taxed, and alcohol should be taxed. These are two vices that are hugely socially destructive, and the reason why they're not being taxed is because they're majority vices, right? There's no other reason. They're not being taxed, treated equally. They're being treated unequally, and the only reason is because they're majority vices. So you don't believe in equal rights. You don't believe in equal protection under the law. You believe that the majority has the right to selectively treat itself better than other citizens of the country. You believe that some citizens are less valid rights possessors than the majority rights possessors. It's clear, it's obvious. You're too stupid to know that's what you're saying, shithead? Well, then that's not my fault. You're too stupid to give me an explanation what the distinction is besides one being a majority vice and one being a minority vice? Is your argument really that society would do nothing about obesity and the expense of diabetes if it wasn't, and all the rest of the stuff that obesity causes, if it was only a small percentage of the human race that was obese? You're saying that if it was only 10 or 15 or 20% of the population that drank alcohol and killed all these people on the highway, that society would just say, oh yeah, let's just leave it alone. No problem. You know, all the battered women, all the homicides committed by drunks, they do nothing about it. They just sit back and say, no, we're not going to do anything about that. And these are two vices that have overt, aggressive consequences to people who don't participate in the liberty. Where cigarette smokers, outside of whatever your unacceptance of their public existence, are only hurting themselves. Fact. But whatever. Okay, we'll move on. Oh, this is so hard to get through without saying something. He called himself a nicotine American, and you see the way he smokes the cigar. It's laughable. He's trying to get it out of his mouth, so... yeah, sure, you're a natural smoker. Anyway, so here he's defending the fact that, okay, so the federal government used a 70-year-old law that had nothing to do with your regular consumers buying cigarettes. Okay, it was a law used about commerce in bulk tobacco, and they applied that law to say that now companies who sold cigarettes in different states through the federal law had to report to each other, okay, who bought cigarettes in their state. All right, and the only way this law now can get around, it, is you have to go through Indian tribes to buy cigarettes because it's still ambiguous about whether they're covered under the law. But they did apply the law to the Postal Service and UPS, and some of them complied, some of them didn't comply in terms of reporting that they're delivering cigarettes to people's houses. So, I mean, I think most Americans can say that's really onerous. They didn't even pass a new law. They just converted some old law and said, we're just going to make this shit up. We're just going to change an old law and say this is what it means. It means we can basically spy on you, okay, what you're buying. This is also taking place at the same time where they had a law where, there was no sales tax on the internet, on internet purchases. And yet they wrote in a stipulation, except cigarettes. So once again, cigarettes are being carved out for this exceptional treatment. Why are cigarette smokers get carved out for this exceptional treatment? So we didn't even get the exemption to sales tax on internet purchases. Yeah, and he believes in equal protection. So anyway, this is one of my favorite comments. So if you'll make this one, I love this one.
Pretty much unconstitutional.
It's not unconstitutional, Gary. It's your fault for being a retard and not looking up the law. Sorry, sucks to be you. Ignorance of the law is no defense.
Right. So I love that argument, right? So they can have a law that you don't know exists. You're supposed to find it somehow. And then on top of that, we have the examples of all these times, like in New Jersey, they had a seatbelt law, right? And for 2 years, they gave people warning about the seatbelt law. So they gave out tickets that were warning tickets, just so people got used to the idea that you've got to wear a seatbelt. So they gave them exemption to penalty just because it's a majority event, right? So it's again one of these ideas that, well, if most people can't do it, then we'll concede and we'll sit there and say the law doesn't exist. We'll pretend it's a law then. All right, we'll give them some time to understand that this is the game we're going to play now. And so this idea of ignorance of the law is it's a cliche. It doesn't mean anything. Of course it's an excuse. All right, if the law has been malicious, slimy, evil, in terms of converting old law into some kind of new law, yeah, then it's sort of, it's bad on them, you know? So what else do I want to get to? But again, okay, so in this part I did mention the 18 months. They waited 18 months. They got notice of my purchase in 2 weeks. And they waited, well, 16 months. 16 months to send me a tax bill. They had notice in 2 weeks, and it sat there in the Division of Taxation for 16 fucking months. And then they started sending me individual bills for each purchase and expected me to send them individual checks. Isn't that a joke? I was supposed to write 45 fucking checks. I laughed at them. I said, what are you, insane? I'm not going to pay the tax anyway, but I'm certainly not going to write you 45 separate checks. You fucking crazy asses. The government should be burned the fuck down for bullshit like this. And this is what he's defending. I'm going to play this part.
It's grotesquely excessive anyway, and unconstitutional tax vices anyway, and it's not worth it.
See, the funny thing is, here he says it's unconstitutional to tax vices, yet in other videos he did to me, he said he never said that it was unconstitutional to have an excise tax on a vice.
Yeah, that's right. You can make claims in court, okay? You make certain claims. I never claimed in court that it was unconstitutional to tax vices. And if you just listen to what I just said there, I'm basically saying it's not what the tax code is for. So you didn't listen to the sentence, all right? And yeah, I don't think the tax code should be used, okay, for vice control. That's not what the tax code is for. That's what other laws are for. You don't use taxes, okay, as a method of controlling behavior, because it's fundamentally and intrinsically discriminatory against poor people, you retard. All right, if you use a tax levy to tell people how much tea they can have, or this or that, or whatever the commodity is, then the rich get it and the poor don't. Don't you understand how that works, you stupid, insipid moron? So yeah, I'm saying it's unconstitutional in the principle sense that it doesn't treat poor people the same as rich people. It creates a double fucking standard under the law, effectively. We go back to having a poll tax. Remember the poll tax, retard? You think poll taxes were consistent with constitutional principles, you stupid cunt? Yeah, because you're just too stupid. And you're too fucking petty. Alright, this video is going to be too long, so I'm really going to have to cut back. Alright, yeah, we'll just have to do this part.
How would that be? Let's just imagine that in the legal system. Plaintiff comes into court, okay, defending themselves against the accusation that they committed a crime. And they come into court, and the court says to them, well, if you don't plea bargain, if you don't give up now, all right, we're going to add another year to your jail term. We're just going to make up a new penalty for you.
Well, again, Gary, if you'd actually bothered to read the law, you would have known about the 5% penalty to begin with.
Look, Einstein, the amnesty program started after I had already filed my case, retard. So I was already in court. I was already protesting the tax. Even if it didn't come into effect after I had already filed my challenge to the tax, even if it was after that, I don't think you could ever justify a law that denied somebody the right to protest a claim against them without having a penalty applied if they don't win their claim. That's not fucking justice. That's fucking insane. That's worse than kangaroo courts. I just can't believe people are defending this nonsense. Let's play a little bit of it while we're here. I know I'm jumping around.
But again, you didn't really care to read the law. They didn't just invent this penalty for you.
I know, they invented this penalty, so don't be arguing this nonsense. No other state ever used a tax amnesty program that was a threat bargaining program. All right, it's like plea bargaining, right? Plea bargaining means you bargain with the criminal to avoid prosecution expenses. You basically say, look, we'll take some time off if you just say confess so we don't have to waste time on courts and lawyers and all this bullshit. So we'll give you a bargain to confess. All right? That's okay. When you threat bargain, that's not okay. When you say, we're going to increase the penalty, we're going to pile on, why don't you just justify torture, you silly cunt? All right? You don't threat bargain, you plea bargain. You don't know the distinction between those two things, you stupid shit? God, you people are just fucking un-American. This is embarrassing to live in a country with assholes this fucking uncivil. Yes, threat bargaining's okay as long as we have the threats. Man, just, again, don't ever make a video appealing for anything ever. Anything you are for has got to be goddamn evil.
On your taxes. You did not pay sales tax on an item you were supposed to.
So he just says I didn't pay sales tax on an item I was supposed to. Yes, I did. I paid sales tax in Kentucky. I paid cigarette taxes in Kentucky. All right, when do you buy something online where you pay sales tax in both states? Does that happen anywhere? No, I don't think so. Fuck, asshole. Alright, well, this part's it's sort of important. Okay, so there's this tax amnesty program, right? It has a 5% penalty. The catch you have to understand is, if I accept the tax amnesty and I pay the tax under tax amnesty, I have to sign a waiver to all rights to protest the tax. So if I'm in court, I've paid my filing fees, I can't stay in court if I pay the tax under the amnesty threat bargaining program. And so he's going to just do this little jerking off motion
beyond what the law says you owe.
No, actually, the law, again, applies the 5% penalty. That was already known by everyone except for you. So.
Whatever. It wasn't known by everyone anyway, but it's tax amnesty. But again, it can't be a threat. It's not tax amnesty if it's tax threat. Okay, in the first place. In the second place, again, the amnesty program requires you to give up your right to claim the tax was illegally applied to you or inappropriately applied. You give up all legal right to protest the tax assessment, you stupid cunt. You don't see there's something wrong with forcing people, extorting people to give up their right to protest a tax? Shit! This is so fucking stupid. Alright, so he's just wasted a whole bunch of time reading from a document by the federal government about tax amnesty programs, an advisory document. Nowhere in what he read has he said anywhere that any state has ever applied a penalty for not accepting amnesty on taxes. So I'm saying that only one state ever had a tax amnesty law where a penalty was applied, and like I said, the Delaware law, I'm not sure, was ever enforced. But anyway, let's just see what he's going to say here, because this would be very interesting. He just wasted a whole bunch of time reading something where he didn't point out a single state has ever had a penalty, okay, for not complying.
Apparently you didn't do your research then, and multiple states and the District of Columbia have had these tax amnesty programs.
So again, I've really been clear, right? I've been really clear that the tax amnesty program was about the penalty, not tax amnesty. Nowhere did I say there's never been a tax amnesty program before. No, I said there's never been a penalty for not accepting amnesty. There's never been threat bargaining. There's always been plea bargaining, but this is a new approach, this threat bargaining. Duh.
No, Gary. And Gary, the thing you don't seem to understand is the point of the tax amnesty was so you would just have to pay only the back taxes you owed, and you would be able to avoid the penalty that you should have paid because you cheated on your taxes.
Well, whatever. I mean, again, you can't cheat when the tax, in my opinion, is unconstitutional. So I'm not going to argue this point. All right, I protested the tax. I would continue to protest it. It's an illegal tax. It's unconstitutional. And if I got a real judge and a real hearing, I can prove it. I can prove it beyond a reasonable doubt because none of you assholes can give me one counter argument okay, pointing out. Give me one reasonable reason why we should believe that the only reason cigarette taxes are being taxed at 800% and alcohol is being taxed at 30% and food is being taxed at 0% is because one is a majority vice and one is a minority vice. Now, if you can give me a single, solitary, rational reason why that isn't the only reason, then fine. But you're not going to be able to construct that reason because it doesn't fucking exist. You cunt. Alright, he's really misrepresenting the tax amnesty program, okay? Again, it requires you to give away your right to protest the tax. You can't stay in court, you can't go to court, you can't protest the tax if you pay the tax under the amnesty program. Right? That's the issue at hand here. It is a separate penalty. It's not a penalty for late payment. It's not a penalty. It's not an interest payment. It's a separate penalty the amnesty program imposes on top of any existing penalties you may already owe. Oh, Jesus. You just can't get it right. So here he goes again. Watch this.
This could be a lot of money we're talking about, okay? A tax amnesty law. Somebody could owe 20 or 30 or 40 grand worth of tax, and so a 5% penalty would be really pretty onerous. So anyway.
You know, I think if someone bought that many cigarettes that they owed a $20,000, $30,000, or $40,000 tax bill to the state, I think they'd be able to pay the $5.
It's a tax amnesty program. It wasn't a cigarette tax amnesty program. It was for any kind of tax liability, you retard. People right now in the state of New Jersey are protesting property tax assessments. They're protesting lots of tax assessments, and some of those assessments come into the hundreds of thousands or even millions of dollars in tax that they are protesting. The terms of the amnesty is, if you don't say you're guilty and pay the tax, they will penalize you for going to court. It's that fucking obvious. And that's why no other states have ever done it. It's because it's that obviously wrong. Fuck. Alright, this part he's reading the judge's decision on the motion for the judge to recuse himself. And he wastes a whole bunch of time reading what the judge has to read, which is the law. And so here's the part where the judge explains what he did. And this is really, this should be entertaining from what I recall.
Quote, I have reviewed in my own mind and from my own notes what transpired in the telephone conversation, which I understand to be the basis for Mr. Mosher's motion. I do not have a transcript of that recording because, through my own error, obviously in retrospect, we did not have that conversation on the motion.
Right, so the judge is admitting an error right there. So here's another error. And now the judge is even conceding that I didn't even bring up in my motion. So here's another error the judge made.
On the record. The purpose of the call, as I indicated to Mr. Mosher, was to make sure he was aware of the alternative of amnesty, because in my...
Right. Now, so here you file a lawsuit, right, claiming specific things about breaches of conduct in the state bureaucracy, violations of your constitutional rights, and the judge feels some obligation to inform you of an amnesty law. There's nothing in the amnesty law requiring judges to make these phone calls. It's completely bizarre procedure. Go ask somebody go ask plaintiffs how many times they had judges call them before the trial starts. Go ask them how often that one happens, Bubba. Yeah. No, so yeah, we're going to take the judge's word for it, are we? I don't think so.
In my view, that would have given him a method of resolving the matter without incurring the interest costs and eliminating...
Right, I mean, I'm clearly protesting the tax. I really don't give a fuck about interest. I don't give a fuck about the penalty. What I give a fuck about is the law and the principles involved. That's why I'm in court. Clearly, explicitly, without any... There's no doubt here, okay? What the judge did was basically send a message, hey, guess what? I don't like you coming to my court with this shit, and I don't want to hear it.
The risk that he might ultimately have to pay those costs and a 5% penalty.
Yeah, and a 5% penalty. Again, no other amnesty law contains a 5% penalty. That's what I contended, jackass. So you're just a liar, again.
Since the amount of tax sought was relatively small, I thought that might be something that Mr. Mosher should consider.
Right, so the judge is conceding the amount of tax is relatively small, a few $100, so $700, $800, whatever it was, right? So he's conceding that it's not a huge amount of tax, and that obviously I'm in court because I'm protesting the tax, you fucking asshole. Yeah, that's what I'm doing. I'm protesting.
My notes on our telephone conversation, which were made on May 31st, shortly after the conclusion of the telephone conversation, are as follows. I note that Mr. Mosher and the Deputy Attorney General Goldschmidt participated, and I'll read you my notes. I told him...
Yeah, so this is a separate conversation, okay? So first, that's got to be understood, okay? Goldschmidt wasn't part of the conversation where the judge called me, all right, and informed me of this tax amnesty law. No, there was no other person involved in that telephone conversation.
Then he had not denied purchase of cigarettes. I told him I wanted to be sure he knew about amnesty. He asked about benefits. I told him no interest, no 5% penalty. He wanted to talk about his constitutional claims. I told him...
Yeah, well, the point of the other part of that is that, yeah, I wanted to point out, too, that I had to give up my right to pursue this legal action if I paid the frickin' tax.
I do not want to discuss the merits of the case.
Right, so he doesn't want to discuss the merits of the case, but yet he comes to the judge, asks me this stupid question. Well, nowhere in your complaint do you say you didn't buy the cigarettes. Now, how can you not discuss the merits of the case and answer that question from the judge? It's impossible.
He said he was being pressured to accept amnesty. I said no pressure was intended. Mrs. Goldschmidt said she had sent him a letter explaining amnesty. I said that if I had known that, I would not have had to call. He asked me when we would have a hearing, 2007. I said I would schedule the hearing at an appropriate time and terminated the conversation.
Yeah, right, exactly. This is after months of nonsense, useless, no point in this delay, right? Huge delay, nothing's happening. These fucktards aren't letting this fucking case process. All right, I had another case stuck in New Jersey court on a motion for 7 fucking years.
And that's the end of my notes. In fact, a hearing notice was sent out on June 10th, 2002, scheduling this matter for July 22nd, and then it says 2001, or I think Gary might have gotten his dates wrong there. In reviewing my notes and my recollection of the telephone conversation, I find nothing to warrant my recusing myself from hearing this matter.
Right, he doesn't address any of the points I just made, right? So I make points, he doesn't address any of the points and just says I'm not going to recuse myself. Well, that's fine, he has a right to do that, okay? But the law does say if I have a reasonable belief that he has a prejudice against my case, that he should recuse himself. That's what the law says. I think my belief that he has compromised his impartiality was quite reasonable, especially when we get back to those constitutional issues where the judge had told me he had no jurisdiction over federal constitutional issues and I couldn't argue them in my case. I mean, it's a huge, gigantic error on his part. But no, let's not pay any attention to that.
Mr. Mosher read into the record what obviously is a transcription of his recording of our conversation, a recording made without my knowledge or Mrs. Goldschmidt's knowledge, and the transcript appears to be accurate and is consistent with my notes. However, Mr. Mosher did not place into the record in his argument the portion of the conversation where I discussed with him my concern that he was aware about amnesty, which, as I've said, was the purpose of the phone call.
Yeah, well, that's whatever. The recording of the conversation was in the record, okay? I didn't transcribe the whole conversation because that's not my fucking job, frankly. Yeah.
Not regard the call as reflecting a decision on my part as to any of the merits or as to the merits of any issues presented in Mr. Mosher's complaint. Except
for the fact that he said, first, why don't you say in your complaint you didn't buy cigarettes? Because I only want to hear how you didn't buy the cigarettes. And the fact that he said he doesn't have jurisdiction over constitutional issues. So let's leave out those two very important facts.
I have reviewed that complaint again in connection with today's motion, and my review reveals what Mr. Mosher acknowledged in his argument. That is, that the complainant does not deny the purchase of the cigarettes. It raises a raft of other issues, some constitutional, some appearing to be based on fairness or other similar grounds. I continue to believe that it was appropriate for Mr. Mosher to consider amnesty given the amount of the tax liability which was imposed.
All right, so you've just read into the record he just pointed out there's a raft of other issues. That's how he characterizes a complaint. And you're saying that doesn't sound a little bit like a bias against, huh? He says he bought cigarettes, well, guilty, and he has this other raft of complaints that I'm not going to be bothered to listen to. It's quite obvious what he's saying. I don't want to be bothered with those constitutional issues. They're not my problem. He said explicitly he doesn't have jurisdiction over constitutional issues, which is a lie. And you're defending this. You're defending this is what people should get when they go to a fucking court and pay money. This is the kind of asshole judgery they should get. You're defending that. I mean, you couldn't be a more disgusting creature, a more disgusting, un-American motherfucking cunt. You're the one that should move to another country, you jackass. You're going to tell me I should leave? No, assholes like you should be sent the fuck home. Okay, go back to the fucking worm-infested, disgusting cesspool you belong in, you diseased motherfucker.
Upon him and the risk of incurring interest penalties. I do not believe that the substance or tenor of the telephone conversation that we had on May 31st indicated or reflected a decision on my part as to the merits of the case as to...
Right, a raft of other issues which I am not going to pay any attention to. I mean, it's quite obvious. Bullshit on you. Defend this crap. Go ahead, defend it. All right, just demonstrate so fucking clearly what kind of character you motherfucking cunts have. No character. No integrity. No honesty. Again, fuck you, Matt. Okay, now he has jumped, right? He hasn't even played the part where he reads the motion to recuse, okay? This motion to recuse happened a year before the part he's reading now, which is the judge's final decision. Apparently he doesn't know this is the judge's final decision, okay? And so he's reading this now as if it points out how the judge says he will hear constitutional issues. So this is after all argument in the case and after filings have been closed. So I can make no further arguments. I can make no other claims. I get to say nothing more in the case. All right? And that's what he's going to read now.
Upon him of taxes under the Cigarette Tax Act, New Jersey 64:40, A1, and following particularly Section 8 of that statute. And under the New Jersey Sales and Use Tax Act, legal code, which taxes retail sales of tangible personal property. Cigarette sales were exempt from sales tax.
So he's reading this superfluous stuff.
Which was contained in blah, 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 was repealed by the laws of 1990, Chapter 40, Section 1. And so after the effective date of that statute, which I believe was 1991, cigarette tax, cigarette sales were subject not only to tax under the cigarette tax, but also to sales and use tax. The factual...
So there, they changed the law in 1990, okay, again, for only cigarettes. The only item exempted, changed the law for, were cigarettes. So again, another category where cigarette smokers are now treated differently than any other class of citizen. So another example where laws were changed, perverted, distorted to be discriminatory against cigarette smokers and not against any other vice abusers.
The background for the matter is as follows. The New Jersey Division of Taxation received information from Smokes Advantage of Louisville, Kentucky, which is an unlicensed distributor of cigarettes in New Jersey, that it had shipped cigarettes to...
That was legally advertising in the state of New Jersey. So you make sense out of that. They could legally advertise in the state of New Jersey, and somehow people in New Jersey weren't supposed to be able to buy things that were legally being advertised in the state of New Jersey? Curious.
So, Mr. Mosher, in connection with those sales, no cigarette tax or sales and use tax was paid. Purchases included 52 cartons of cigarettes between August of 1999 and March of 2000. The purchases were made either by internet or by telephone from Smokes Advantage. The information was forwarded to the Division of Taxation by Smokes Advantage pursuant to the Jenkins Act,
Jenkins Act. That's the 70-year-old federal law they are using to force companies to disclose the credit card purchase information of cigarette smokers. No other class of human being in America is treated this way, just cigarette smokers. Now, your personal information will be forwarded to the state government in which you live if you buy a cigarette product in any other state.
USC Section 375 and following, the selling price of the cigarettes were sold by Smokes Advantage were included in the notification provided to the director and to the division. In September and October of 2000, and in one instance in April 2001, the director sent letter notifications to the plaintiff advising him of his tax liability based on the various invoices of sales from Smokes Advantage to him from the plaintiff protested the
16 months after I bought the cigarettes.
director's effort to impose the tax, and a telephone conference was held in December of 2001. The director issued his final determination on January 8th of 2002, sustaining the tax assessments under the Cigarette Tax Act and the Sales and Use Tax Act. Total liability for those taxes, including interest through 2002, was $569.82.
He's wasting your time with all this bullshit, right? Just to get to the part where the judge in the final decision says something he didn't say before the case was heard. So he's reading the final decision now before he's even playing the motion that took place a year earlier.
Plaintiff filed a timely appeal at the tax court after the director's final determination. Plaintiff does not dispute that he purchased cigarettes I've described for his own use and for use by friends, that he purchased them from Smokes Advantage, an out-of-state vendor, via the internet or telephone. He does not dispute that neither cigarette tax or sales and use tax was paid in connection with his purchase. He challenges the...
No, he does say he paid sales tax and cigarette taxes in the state of Kentucky.
...position of the tax on constitutional grounds, noting that, quote, the power to tax carries with it the potential to persecute, end quote, and he regards the imposition of taxes here as a form of persecution. In addition to that allegation in Mr.
Yeah, and you'll find no response to that allegation in the judge's decision. None whatsoever. No explanation how it isn't a discriminatory tax, how the 800% number is excessive. No response whatsoever to that claim. At all.
Brief in response to the summary judgment motion states as follows, quote, I would contend that even by today's established judicial perspective, consistent logic and justice requires any honest trier of fact to conclude that cigarettes have been taxed to unconstitutional excess. Current legal jargon requires a liberty interest to achieve fundamental status, be entitled to the protection of obligating the state to demonstrate a compelling interest before it is allowed to abridge that liberty.
Right. This is the legal argument I made, part of the legal argument I made, stating basically this is the legal precedent. The law basically says you can't discriminatorily tax and excessively tax. Blah, 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 blah.
I would simply argue that you cannot get more fundamental on liberty interest than the one produced by a decades-long legal physical addiction. He also raised the following point, quote, excessively taxing minority vices is an all-or-nothing form of democracy, where an ungeographically segregated minority's political disenfranchisement is assured, amounts to taxation without representation. Then he goes on, a further ground is, quote, in light of the recent Supreme Court decisions, it is difficult to argue that the words due process and equal protection hold any meaning whatsoever under the tyranny of the political despots who have seized control of our legal system. End quote. He argues under the burden of proof, quote, it should not be my responsibility to prove to this judge that he violated fundamental constitutional law when he threatened me with added monetary damages if I do not hastily retreat from his court, and for my pursuit of, quote, redress of grievances, also included...
So remember, this is the judge's paraphrase of my filings and my argument in the case. So this is the judge's paraphrase. A paraphrase he obviously wrote before final arguments took place, because he read this right after final arguments took place. So he already had made his decision before he even heard the arguments, the oral arguments.
The added obligation to leave behind the filing fee I already paid and any future legal rights regarding the disputed issues. Nor should it be my responsibility to prove that the state can't, in legal fact, wait 10 years to send out a tax notice if it felt like it.
Oh, yeah, that was what I was told by the Division of Taxation when I called them on the fact that they waited 18 months to send me a tax bill. That was what they told me, okay? So I have that recording, too, that we can send you a tax, we can wait 10 years to send you a tax bill. That was their response to the accusation that this is grotesque incompetence and nobody should have to tolerate this from public fucking servants. Yeah, you gonna wait 10 fucking years? Maybe you should wait 10 years for your fucking paycheck, you fucking cunt.
And that's the end of Gary's little part there.
That's the judge's little part there. Be clear, asshole. Yep, now blow it out. Get it out
continues.
Quick.
I will address each of the issues raised by Mr. Mosier. I should note, first of all, that with respect to the language I have quoted relating to the what he regarded as a threat that he hastily retreat from my court, I assume that the allegation is based on a conversation that was held at the very inception of my handling of this matter, where I attempted...
Very inception, right, again, so we're going back to the beginning. This is the judge's final decision on a summary judgment motion, so he didn't even hear the whole case. He just basically made a summary judgment motion on the papers and one argument.
Notify or be sure that Mr. Mosier was aware of the tax amnesty program, then in effect, and pointed out to him that if he was eligible for amnesty, which I believe he was, that if he did not accept...
So let's also understand that through summary judgment, they can basically disengage any effort to do discovery. I mean, I obviously would have wanted to do discovery based on the Division of Taxation's records and who else they had notified 10 or 20 or 30 months late. Okay, just to find out exactly who takes care of this and why it takes 18 months to send out a notice that you owe taxes. It would have been nice to be able to get that information, why exactly it took 18 months to send out a stupid $50 bill.
The amnesty, apparently Gary doesn't know which version of accept to write there, he would be subject by statute to an additional 5% penalty. As I have explained to him in previous proceedings in this matter, there was no intent on my part to threaten Mr. Mosier or to indicate to him that he had no rights to proceed in this matter. I simply wanted to alert him to the legal consequences of...
Right, so let's all believe that. That's what judges do. They sit in their chambers and say, oh, I think I'll make a phone call and give this guy some advice. I'll give him some free advice. That's judge's job. I'll call up the plaintiff and suggest they confess. Because, you know, that maybe if I suggest they confess, and they sign a confession, then maybe if I suggest that that's what they should do, then maybe we can avoid the whole trial altogether. Maybe I can just nicely suggest that they give up and not bother trying to make an argument in my court. Come on, you silly fuck.
Not accepting amnesty. In the course of that conversation, which was recorded by Mr. Mosier but was not on the record, unfortunately, in any...
Yeah, by whose fault is that? That's right, off the record. Why was it off the record? Why is a judge having off-the-record conversations? Why are they doing that? Oh, I guess it might be because they're going to try to extort you out of their court, and they're going to tell you you can't make arguments you have a fundamental constitutional right to make. Maybe that's why it's off the fucking record.
Event it has been reported. I believe I made a statement that I did not have jurisdiction over federal constitutional questions. Assuming I made that statement, I misspoke.
Yeah, assuming I made that statement, right? This is the same asshole who's asking me, why don't you argue in your papers that you didn't buy cigarettes? Right? Assuming he's heard the fucking recording, he's heard himself quoted, he's conceded he said the fucking words, and now he's saying assuming. Assuming I made that statement. It was a fucking statement witnessed. That one was witnessed by the other fucking lawyer. I mean, she concurred in that fucking lunacy. Yeah, because right after that conversation, I remember, the three of us were on the phone, right? Off the record. And then I talked to her right after that, and I said, what the fuck is this bullshit? You work for the Attorney General. The fucking judge just told me I can't argue constitutional issues. And then she told me I couldn't argue the damn issues.
I apologize to Mr. Mosier and Ms. Goldschmidt. I do have jurisdiction over those questions, and I will address them over the course of my opinion today.
Right. Okay, so Einstein, do you understand what just took place here? We had a trial for a fucking year, and for that fucking year I couldn't argue the constitutional issues, you stupid cunt. This is his final decision, you stupid ass fucking wipe. You pompous asshole.
Now we get to the constitutional questions which Gary says the judge never answered or addressed.
I couldn't argue them, you jackass! God, how stupid are you? I couldn't put them in my papers. I couldn't argue the Jenkins Act. Do you know what the Jenkins Act is? Is it in my papers anywhere? No, because I wasn't allowed to argue it, you stupid shit! Yeah, you're so convincing. So convincing.
Mr. Mosier challenges the constitutionality of the Cigarette Tax Act and presumably the constitutionality of the Jenkins Act. He quotes the 15 USC blah blah blah.
Right. Arguments I wasn't allowed to make in my paper. So again, there's no point in him saying Mr. Mosier does something when Mr. Mosier wasn't allowed to fucking argue it, you dumb shit.
And following particularly, I assume Mr. Mosier challenges is to Section 376 of the Jenkins.
Oh, he assumes for me. Isn't that marvelous? So the judge can assume my argument for me, make my argument for me after he's closed the case. He'll make the argument he thinks I would have made. He'll assume my argument and then make it for me after he's closed the case. And that's what you call fucking justice. I call that fucking bullshit. And the fact that you can't say the words that that's fucking bullshit just means that you are an ass fucking hole. And so are your friends, Matt, in particular.
Jenkins Act, which in paragraph A2 provides that, quote, not later than the 10th day of each calendar month, in other language, a person who sells or transfers for-profit cigarettes in interstate commerce, whereby such cigarettes are, let me go back and rephrase that, Section 376A of the Jenkins Act provides, quote, any person that sells or transfers for-profit cigarettes in interstate commerce, whereby such cigarettes are shipped into a state taxing the sailor use of cigarettes to other than a distributor of licensed by, or his text-to-speech thing fucks up a lot, are located in such state, or who advises and offers cigarettes for such sale or transfers and shipment shall, item 2, not later than the 10th day of each calendar month, file with the tobacco tax administrator of the state into such shipment is made a memorandum or copy of the invoice covering each and every shipment made during the previous.
Yes, and does this sound like something that everybody should have been aware of, that this Jenkins Act was a law that somebody should somehow know, that 70 years ago they passed a law, and that this law is relevant to individuals who go on vacation and buy a pack of cigarettes in Kentucky, and that they're technically now obligated to go pay New Jersey cigarette taxes? That they should run home right away and file a report with the Division of Taxation explaining that they bought a pack of cigarettes in Kentucky while they were on vacation, because that's technically what the law requires. Yeah, I don't think that's what the law was intended to cover. I think everybody can kind of figure out that this law doesn't sound like a law that was covering usual consumers. Yeah, I don't think so.
Previous calendar month into such state. The memorandum or invoice in each state to include the name and address of the person to whom the shipment was made, the brand and the quantity thereof.
Right. So this is about the shipment. The old law is about basically people trucking in tons of cigarettes, okay? Whole shipments of cigarettes. Does this shipment stuff sound like what regular consumers do when they buy a pack of cigarettes? Oh, I made a shipment. I bought a pack of cigarettes at the drugstore. I had them shipped in. I shipped them into my house. Yeah, on a ship. They came on a fucking ship.
Of determining the constitutionality of taxing provisions are well established and have been articulated not only by the New Jersey courts, but by the United States Supreme Court. Madden v. Commonwealth of Kentucky, 309 U.S.
Right. So now the judge is going to basically point out how they have a right to tax commodities, substances. Duh. I'm not arguing the right to tax. I'm arguing that the tax is discriminatory and illegally discriminatory. Duh.
3, decision of the United States Supreme Court in 1940, the court stated as follows at pages 87 and 88, quote, the broad discretion, quote, as the classification process by legislature in the field of taxation has long been recognized by this court 50 years ago. This court 50 years ago concluded that the 14th Amendment was not intended to compel the states to adopt an iron rule of equal taxation. And the passage...
Right. Iron rule of equal taxation. Now, you can understand that, right? If somebody says it's not an iron rule, they're saying, look, it's not something that can't be fudged with a little bit, right? That's what they mean by iron rule. So even the judge's own argument makes my argument for me, right? That there can't be an iron rule, okay? But obviously 800% versus 30% is way off any kind of iron rule, right? That's not even close to the same thing, right? So it's not about an iron rule. It's about a preposterously fucking mercury rule, okay? It's flowy, mushy, goopy shit you could never grip rule. This is no rule at all. It's the rule that just allows there to be grotesque discrimination, which is against the fucking law. Iron rule. I mean, let's hear that again. I mean, I wish I could go back easier, but let's see if I can do it.
New Jersey courts, but by the United States Supreme Court. Madden v. Commonwealth of Kentucky, 309 U.S. 83, decision of the United States Supreme Court in 1940, the court stated as follows at pages 87 and 88, quote, the broad discretion, quote, as the classification process by legislature in the field of taxation has long been recognized by this court 50 years ago. This court 50 years ago concluded that the 14th Amendment was not intended to compel the states to adopt an iron rule of equal taxation.
Right, iron rule of equal taxation. There you go. See? Now you really can get this, right? That the old court, he's quoting a 1940 court, right? So that's how far back he has to go to find anything at all. And here the court is clearly saying, okay, you can have some fudge. You can mess with the code a little bit. It doesn't have to be explicitly fair and equal. But that doesn't mean it can be preposterously unfair and preposterously unequal, obviously.
And the passage of time is only served to underscore the wisdom of that recognition of the large area of discretion which is needed by the legislatures in formulating sound tax policy. Traditionally, classification has been a device for fitting tax programs to local needs and usages in order to achieve an equitable distribution of the tax burden. It has, because of this, been pointed out that in taxation, even more than in other fields, legislatures process the greatest freedom in classification, since the members of the legislature necessarily enjoy a familiarity with local conditions, which this court cannot have the presumption of constitutionality, can be overcome only by...
Isn't that even ironic language? That, yes, basically the majority elects the local politicians. Right, so again, clearly there was no implication here that minority vices should be taxed, and certainly that 1940 court would in no way endorse the discriminatory taxation of a minority vice.
Most explicit demonstration that a classification is a hostile and oppressive discrimination against particular persons and classes. The burden is on the one attacking the legislative arrangement to negative every conceivable basis which might support it. Right.
So I just now haven't I basically obligated you to do that? I've basically said, look, I can't. Give me one reason for this inequity that doesn't point to discrimination. Give me one reason why alcohol is a better vice. Give me one reason why overeating is a better vice, that somehow it's a less destructive, less expensive, less something, less some category it fits into besides it being a majority vice. Show me one category it fits into that cigarettes do not, okay, that should exempt it from the same treatment. That's your obligation, okay? It's my obligation to say I can find none. Okay? That's all I can do. There is no other explanation. There is no alternative explanation. I'm entitled to be produced with an explanation. If that explanation cannot be produced, the court is saying you can't do it.
Stores of Ohio versus Bowers, 358 U.S. 522, decided by the court in 1959. The court states at pages 526 and 27, that, quote, of course the states in their exercise of the taxing power are subject to the requirements of the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment.
Well, there you go. They're saying it pretty clearly, okay, that you can't have a tax. The 14th Amendment basically says under equal protection, they're just basically saying that, look, you can't have disproportionate treatment. You can't treat one class of people differently than another class in the same situation. And unless you have some reason to treat them differently, people treated differently have a right to protest and say, fuck you, you can't do that. That's, again, the 1950 court would, again, the 1959 court, again, would have said, it would have ruled in my favor.
The clause imposes no iron rule of equality, prohibiting the flexibility and variety that are appropriate to reasonable schemes of state taxation. The state may impose different specific taxes on different trades and professions and vary the rate of excise on various products. It is not required to resort to close distinctions or maintain a precise scientific uniformity.
Right, precise scientific uniformity, right? No one's claiming they weren't precisely uniform. 800%, 30% is not even within eyeshot of precisely uniform. It's so far fucking away from precisely uniform. The claim is not that it's not precisely uniform. The claim is it's preposterously unequal.